Greetings and welcome to PinballHelp. Mike here. Today, as part of my series on features of pinball, I'm going to talk about wedgeheads. Wedgeheads are a particular class of games, obviously identified by a kind of a wedge shape, you see? And what wedgeheads are is a certain class of a certain type of game that are a little bit more collectible than other games. And you might wonder, why is that? Well, I'm going to explain what is the deal with wedgeheads and why are they different or better than regular pinball machines. So, wedgeheads are a term that was given primarily to Gottlieb games, and the distinctive feature was the wedge-shaped head. But that's not the most distinctive feature about these games. The most distinctive feature about these games is that they're one-player games, and because they are a one-player game, they have different types of rule sets than regular games. And I'm talking about in the era of electromechanical machines. This doesn't really apply in solid-state games. But in these old EM games, wedgeheads were something special. And I'll explain why. Because when these games were made, it was in the era of mechanical engineering with relays and switches. So they didn't have memory like what we normally take for granted in modern machines, which can keep track of how far along you are on every mode and all the little things you've done and all of that. These games, the extent of the memory they would have would usually be per ball, like how much bonus you've racked up. And that would be stored in a little relay that when the ball ended, it would count down. So all these electromechanical games here, they would traditionally, and see there's multiplayer versions here, these games would traditionally be every ball was like a new game. They didn't have a whole lot of features that carried over from one ball to another. In modern games, let me put this guy on. It's probably on right, yeah. In modern games, you have very elaborate rule sets where you've got all kinds of goals and objectives. And these objectives are often so complicated that you can't just do them on one ball. So you're working your way towards some kind of mini wizard mode, then the game remembers your progress. But in these old electromechanical games, they didn't have the capacity for that. So oftentimes, if it was a 3 or a 5 ball game, every ball was a new chance starting back from the beginning. There was very little features that carried over from ball to ball because these things didn't have a whole lot of memory. And when you're playing a 4-player game like 4 million BC or Jet Spin, you have to reset everything when the new player comes along because otherwise it becomes a little bit imbalanced and difficult from an engineering standpoint. There are exceptions. 4 million BC is a game that has a multi-ball in it, and the multi-ball can get stolen by a subsequent player. That's one of the weird exceptions. But most of the time, the bonus and everything, the progress, is reset on every ball. So this is where wedgeheads are a bit of a different animal. With a wedgehead game, you can have a deeper rule set. You can have longer, harder objectives because since there's only one player, you don't have to have 2, 3, or 4 different sets of memory indicating, where the player is in their progress. And you can't, like when you got drop targets, which is a very common feature, these games couldn't reset the drop targets. They either reset them all or not. So what if you have a game like this? This is Abracadabra, where I'm on ball 2, and you can see that there's 2 drop targets that are down. It didn't reset the drop targets after the first ball. So it's pretty hard to get all of these drop targets down. And so this way that carries over from ball to ball. I can continue to try to knock all those drop targets down, and I get 5 balls to do it. So this deeper rule set means that you can have harder game objectives that can take more than one ball to accomplish. And this is one of the reasons why so many people really like the wedgeheads, because the rules are more complicated. A little bit of a deeper rule set. Now, by modern standards, it's still a really shallow game because, look at modern solid state games are incredibly complicated. But this is what makes these games different from regular multiplayer games of the same generation. And they're a little bit more challenging. Oh. Let's see if I can get the drop target. So that's why Wedgeheads are a very cool collectible game. And as Gottlieb and these other game manufacturers, they often had they had like a different name for the two-player version and a different name for the one-player version and all that. Same thing here. There's the Target Pool is the Wedgehead version. But there were some games where they had the same playfield design, but they had a Wedgehead version and a non-Wedgehead version. A good example of that is El Dorado, and they made multiple versions of that playfield. But El Dorado has a little, again, it's a single player, so I don't know if on El Dorado the drop targets reset or the game rules are different than it's, say, Target Alpha, which is the 4-player version. But I assume in many cases they are. I'd have to check on that. But a lot of these, there's not a sync. I don't know if there's a multiple player version of Target Pool. It's another game where there's all kinds of targets that you have to knock down. You have to hit all of these things. So it takes multiple balls, but it's really satisfying when you can do that. And so that's one of the neat things about Wedgeheads and why they're so neat and collectible and sought after. So they'll always typically be a little bit more valuable than your regular games because a little bit deeper rule set because you only have to keep track of one player. So there you have it. What's the deal with Wedgeheads? Why are they so interesting? Why are they so collectible? So for more, visit PinballHelp.com. Be sure to click like and subscribe to my YouTube channel, YouTube/PinballHelp. There's even a subreddit, Reddit/r/PinballHelp, where you can post questions. And until next time, thanks for watching.